Hey, finally I get to do the second part of the anger reduction talk, and there's a few moving elements to this thing, meaning, so as part of the cancer treatment, every once in a great while there's that rare human being, that gets hiccups as part of the chemotherapy. And so I have now been in hiccuping jags in the past 2 days. I've started started Wednesday morning at 4 a.m. and between then and this moment, which is Thursday at about 4:30 p.m., I must have had 30 of these things, which I think any reasonable person would go, yeah, sure, whatever, must seem like 30, but no, I'm pretty sure that's a low estimation. And so doesn't matter except to say I will need to stop, because that will just be a distraction if I start hiccuping again. My hope is that that doesn't happen. I've noticed that drinking water causes me to start hiccuping, also helps me to stop, but the point there is that they tell you to keep hydrated really well when you're taking chemotherapy, because one needs to flush the kidneys. So there's my conundrum. Anyway, I would say that it's probably a good idea for me to stop periodically to get the whatever good lectures in the can, and then I will ask my man Dylan to put the whole thing together. Hopefully that'll work out. So here we go. Now, remembering the first part, remembering that my claim that is really based on solid science is that we all are born with essentially limited frustration tolerance that we can endure, that as we encounter difficulties in our lives, we are not taught how to process these difficulties and get them out of us, typically. Even if we get some of them out, maybe there's residue. And over time, this residue builds up and our container gets full. And they're full of resentments. And the cure to resentment is forgiveness. And in addition to the resentment that is built up, each one of us also have what is described by people doing this kind of research as emotional bank accounts. And what is, causes withdrawals from those emotional bank accounts are mostly the following things: stress, and I'm going to talk to you later about how we can reduce stress with this same technique that I'm talking about, this ABC'S of REBT. Also, another thing that costs out of that bank account is pain, and another thing is self-discipline. So one way to add to our emotional bank account is first identify those things that we are able to reduce in our lives that cost out of that emotional bank account. So for example, I noticed during a period of really intense watching the goofy politics that are currently a part of our culture, that I was walking around for some days just really on edge, really irritated, and doing my self-work. I examined, well, what am I doing differently that is causing this irritation potentially? And I realized that I was spending a whole lot of time watching news and listening to people that I do not like very much, that are at the upper echelons of the government or trying to get there, or however that works. And so I stopped doing that. And then in addition to that, I paid into that account. And what I mean by that is that there are very life-affirming podcasts that a person can listen to, because there's a lot of really good in the world. And, you know, I would recommend, for example, Krista Tippett on Being, and, you know, I tend to like Jordan Peterson, and I get that he's a little too, you know, what would the term be? Straight-laced with his ways of doing things. I don't agree with everything that he says. I like listening to things like Alan Watts. There are these programs called Chill Steps, where they put very interesting speakers to sound, beat, echo, whatever, and it makes for very fun listening. There's the same with a guy named Terrence McKenna, who I like a lot. There's Ram Dass is a good guy to listen to. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be palatable to everyone. I'm sure that some people would listen to these folks, and that might cost them out of their emotional bank account. But you figure out for yourself. You know, it might be listening to Jerry Falwell or Joel Osteen, or whoever else it might be. Oh, I find Wayne Dyer's information to be very valuable. So anyway, whatever you can do to build into or build up your emotional bank account is a very good idea. So, you know, withhold the stuff that's costing, and add the stuff that you need in there. This concept of you are what you eat is a very good one to embrace, because it, doesn't just mean what we put into this hole. It's also what we put into, what you ingest in the world is, at least in part, who we become. We are the result of the DNA that we are born with, the potential that we are born with, and then the environmental factors that go into shaping our DNA. And as adults, we are very, very responsible for what we put into our system. And so, while I happen to have been a huge fan of hard driving rock and roll, and I'm not saying there's anything bad with that stuff. I just know that when I went from being a angry guy to trying to be a less angry guy, that it was very, very helpful, and still is, for me to listen to music such as you're hearing in the background here. And there's just a ton of research that is very interesting. I won't bother you with that now, but a lot of research that shows that the kinds of music that we listen to, and the kinds of TV that we watch, and movies that we watch, and video games, yes, these things influence us. Now, it's a factor in the influencing. It's a variable. It's not something that is going to cause your healthy, well-balanced human being to go off the deep edge if they watch a violent movie. But it just makes sense, doesn't it, that if you're going to watch violence all day, every day, like I had a client, loved this guy, but he was just deeply fascinated by the postings of beheadings and things like that from over there where ISIS was doing their thing a couple of years ago. And having gotten them to the point of not doing that really affected his mood in a positive way. So, it's stating the obvious, but you know, we got to do what we got to do in order to help ourselves. Just knowing these things is just the starting point. So anyway, then the idea is to reduce the container of the upset that we're carrying around. Now, a beautiful truth is that we can also decide to disallow for anybody to put any into our container in the first place. Here's how this works.